August 9th, 2024. Green Township, Ohio. A quiet suburban street where retired couples tend their gardens and neighbors wave good morning. The kind of place where nothing ever happened, until it did. At 4 p.m., a neighbor steps out of his truck, and hears something that stops him cold. A woman's voice, frantic, desperate, screaming, "Help, help, help, help." He looks down the street. A man is following a woman out onto a porch, and then a stabbing motion, over and over. The woman goes down. The man drags her body back inside. The screen door slams against her head as she disappears through the doorway. He calls 911. His hands are shaking. 3365 Palm Hill Lane. "I just called it in. It looked like somebody got stabbed." He came back out, grabbed her feet, dragged her inside. Her head was bouncing off the step. Police are already on their way. When the first officer arrives, he finds a 75-year-old man sitting on the porch, bleeding from his head, his neck, his chest. 3 stab wounds. His name is Tom Mortimer. He is alive, barely. But the officer's attention shifts almost immediately to what's inside the house. On the floor, covered in blood, lies Barbara Mortimer, 75 years old, unresponsive. She has been stabbed twice in the head and once in the neck, directly through her carotid artery. The officers exchange a look. One of them says quietly into his radio, "I don't think there's much we can do on that one." At 4:15 p.m., Barbara Mortimer is declared dead. Tom is stabilized on the porch, pressure applied to his wounds. An ambulance is called, and then a sergeant crouches down beside him and asks the question. Every officer on scene is already thinking, who did this? Tom Mortimer looks up, and without hesitation he says, "My son, Kenneth Mortimer, was 40 years old." The youngest of Tom and Barbara's 3 children. His older siblings had married, started families, moved on with their lives. Kenneth had not. For most of the past 25 years, he had been in and out of his parents' home, and since 2022, he had been living with them full-time. On the surface, the Mortimers were a quiet, kind family. Tom had worked as a lawyer, Barbara as a sales clerk. They had built a comfortable retirement in a neighborhood where everyone looked out for each other. But beneath the surface, something had been wrong for a very long time. A neighbor who used to know Kenneth described the moment things changed about 10 years ago, when a close friend of Kenneth's died. After that, she said, his parents pulled him away from everyone. No visits, no contact. He became completely isolated. The Kenneth she had known slowly disappeared, replaced by someone harder, sangrier, and deeply unwell. He had been arrested in Michigan for a road rage incident so severe it resulted in 7 months in jail and 5 months in a psychiatric hospital. He came back to Ohio in late 2022 and moved straight into his parents' home. He had no job, no income, no independence. Tom and Barbara paid for his food, his gas, everything. They were supporting a 40-year-old man who had been diagnosed with serious mental illness, and they were doing it alone. His sister would later describe calling the police, repeatedly to report that Kenneth was dangerous. The police, she said, didn't believe them. The system failed them, over and over again. And Barbara, who loved her son despite everything, had driven all the way to Indiana that very morning to attend a mental health seminar, trying, even now, to understand how to help him. She never made it home. By Kenneth's own account, captured on interrogation room footage, the day started small. He had cut the shower curtain weeks earlier because the sound of the shower stressed him out. He had been placing a towel on the bathroom floor to catch the water. Barbara found out that morning. She was furious. She yelled at him for about half an hour. He left the house, bought some beer, drove to the park, went out to Mount Air. Forest. He was trying to clear his head. It didn't work when he came back. His parents were looking at a credit card statement. Words were exchanged. Kenneth told them to shut up. His mother told him he wasn't staying there tonight. Go find a park bench. His father suggested calling the police. And then Barbara said the words that pushed Kenneth over the edge. The police aren't going to do anything. We need to call the crisis unit. The crisis unit, another psychiatrist, another hospital. In Kenneth's mind, that was the one thing he could not face again. He had spent time in psychiatric facilities in Ohio and Michigan. He had been court-ordered onto antipsychotic medication. He had sat through hearings where he felt mocked and dismissed. He had endured 5 months in a Michigan hospital for what he described as nothing, and he was not going back. He walked into the kitchen. He picked up the biggest knife in the house, and he stabbed his father in the head. From the street, neighbors watched in horror as Barbara Mortimer stumbled out at her own front door, screaming, bleeding, trying to get away. Kenneth followed her out. He stabbed her on the porch. She fell. He dragged her back inside by her feet, her head bouncing off the steps as the screen door slammed against her. Tom sat on the couch through all of it, stabbed 3 times, watching. He would later walk out onto the porch, covered in blood. And when a neighbor asked what happened, he said simply, "His son's name is Ken. He's got mental problems." A neighbor had managed to get Kenneth's license plate as he drove away in his gray Honda. That information went out over the radio immediately. Officers began canvassing the area. Within hours, Kenneth's abandoned car was found near Mount Air. Forest door wide open, blood on the front seat, blood on his jeans. Kenneth himself was found nearby. He was calm. He was talking, and one of the officers who arrested him recognized him immediately. They had crossed paths before. "I remember you," the officer said. Kenneth looked at him and said, "I didn't stab my mum." At the station, Kenneth sat down with detectives for an interview. He was agitated, evasive, insulting. He demanded water, threatened to have a seizure, complained about his psychiatric history. But slowly, almost despite himself, the truth started coming out. He described the argument, the shower curtain, his mother's anger, his father's suggestion to call the police. And then those words, crisis unit, and what they meant to him. "There was no way I was dealing with another psychiatrist," he told the detectives. "I had an alcohol problem and I needed to drink tonight, and if that meant stabbing her to death, that's what happened. So what?" He described attacking his father first, then his mother getting up and trying to run. He dragged her back inside. He described the knife, the biggest one in the kitchen. He showed the detectives with his hands approximately how long it was. When asked if he knew it was wrong, he refused to answer. When asked if he loved his mother, he paused, then said he had been close to her, until she threatened to hurt herself. He blamed her for that too. He blamed everyone. The detectives, the psychiatrists, the judge in Michigan, the crisis unit, his parents. And in a moment that stunned even the officers in the room, he said about his father, who gets stabbed to death and doesn't get off the couch, "Run for your life." Tom Mortimer had watched his son murder his wife, and Kenneth was angry at him for not fighting back. Kenneth Mortimer was charged with aggravated murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, and felonious assault. His bond was set at $2 million. His psychiatric history triggered a competency evaluation, but by late 2024, he was found mentally competent to stand trial. On August 8, 2025, nearly 1 year to the day after the attack, he entered a guilty plea. The most serious charge, aggravated murder, was reduced to involuntary manslaughter as part of the plea agreement. She was sentenced to a minimum of 45 years in prison. He will not be eligible for release until he is 86 years old. For the Mortimer family, no sentence feels like enough. They called for help. They warned people. They did everything they were supposed to do, and still, Barbara is gone. Tom is left with the memory of what happened in that house. And Kenneth sits in a cell, still convinced, on some level, that none of it was really his fault. This is not just a story about one violent man. This is a story about what happens when a family is left to handle a mental health crisis entirely on their own, When every call to the police goes nowhere. When every hospitalization ends, and the person comes home more broken than before. When a mother drives to Indiana to attend a seminar on mental illness, because she is desperate, and she loves her son, and she doesn't know what else to do. Barbara Mortimer did not deserve what happened to her. Tom Mortimer did not deserve to watch it. And somewhere, underneath all of Kenneth's anger and denial, there is a man who was failed. Repeatedly, by every system that should have caught him before it reached this point. The system failed. And a woman paid for it with her life. If someone in your life is showing signs of mental illness, don't stay silent. Reach out, ask for help. Because silence, in situations like this, is its own kind of failure. Until next time, stay safe.